Committee. It is February 5th at 11 a.m. We could start by calling roll, please. We can just go around with members. Go ahead.
Felix Vera. Mark Littlefield.
Karen Braga.
Zach Johnson.
Anna Brawley.
Cameron Perez Verdia. Do we have anybody on the phone at this point?
Randy Saltz here.
Great, Mr. Saltz on the phone. All right. And then for those on the phone, if you want to get into the queue, just a reminder, you can text me on my phone. We are, just before we get started, there's a number of changes to the agenda. We had some late additions, so I just wanted to let folks know that under the Anchorage Fire Department, there'll be 2 additional items, wildfire office funding and SAFER, SAFER Act grant replacement. And then under the mayor's office section, there will be 3 items, and these are available. There's copies available. The 813 OIS outside investigator recommendations, 1 item. Another item is AIM 021-2025, and the 3rd item is APD policy review. So there'll be the agenda will have a little more items than we originally had. Great. Well, welcome everybody. I think we'll start with the health department. Kim, do you want to come up? Welcome.
Kimberly Rash, Anchorage Health Department. So today I wanted to introduce to the body some upcoming work that the health department is going to be undertaking in regards to child care licensing code. We are hoping that by Q3 or Q4 of this year, 2025, that there will be a ordinance change coming to the body. In totality, really just aligning our code with the state code. So I wanted to go over some history here to kind of give you a whole picture of where we currently are and where we need to go. So the State of Alaska Division of Public Assistance Child Care Program Office delegates its child care licensing authority to the Municipality of Anchorage Child Care Licensing Program within the Health Department. For child care providers within the MOA, and that's section 47.32.030B. To standardize and maintain high quality levels of child care services, the Municipality of Anchorage adopted many of the State of Alaska child care licensing statutes and regulations referenced in August of 2016. And that was AO 2016-82. There were several parts of the municipal code that were kept as provisional when the code met or exceeded the requirements of the State of Alaska child care statutes and regulations. Governor Mike Dunleavy issued Administrative Order 346 on April 6 of 2023, establishing the Alaska Task Force on Child Care within the Alaska Early Childhood Coordinating Council, with the goal of increasing access to high quality and inclusive child care for Alaskan families. Childcare in Alaska took a hard hit following the COVID pandemic. In October of 2023, the McKinley Research Group reported that since 2019, the number of licensed programs in Alaska had dropped by 20%, and 51% of Alaskan families could not fully participate in the labor force due to the cost, availability, and quality of childcare. The State of Alaska Governor's Task Force on Child Care reported in 2023 that between January of 2020 and December 31st of 23, Alaska had lost nearly 10% of its licensed child care providers. For the first time in 20 years, Anchorage had fewer than 200 licensed child care programs. Proposition 14, the Anchorage Child Care and Early Education Fund, was passed by Anchorage voters in April of 2023. Proposition 14 dedicates the Municipality of Anchorage's marijuana tax revenue to support child care and early childhood education. The funds started accumulating in January of 24 and will be dispersed beginning of 2025, with an estimated $5 million available annually. Funds can be spent creating access to child care and early education programs, on staffing and or livable wages or facilities, or on data collection or research related to childcare and early education, to name a few examples. The ACE Fund implementation team was created to analyze childcare and early education best practices, strategies, and trends. Communicate and engage with the public about how best to use the funds and build a sustainable system for the future. August of 24 saw changes in the Anchorage School District start times, which was accompanied by uncertainty regarding our community's ability to provide quality childcare. The childcare licensing team collaborated with stakeholders such as providers, parents, businesses, and community partners to work collectively regarding future childcare and early education needs. During these talks with stakeholders, it became evident that there are potential barriers to childcare that should be reviewed. Some of these barriers that we are currently seeing are regulatory conflicts between the state regulation and municipal code, such as inspection scheduling requirements, ratios and care availability for certain age groups, fees associated with startup costs, credentialing requirements for administrators, competitive wages, high cost of childcare, little to no incentive for licensure, lengthy application process, exemption requirements, and limited issuance of licenses, only available on the first day of the month. So as the community looks to remove as many potential barriers as possible, the childcare licensing team, as well as the health department, recognizes a need to better align with the state and is seeking to remove certain sections out of Chapter 16.55. And so, again, that is a large effort to really align ourselves with the state in order to create more licensed childcare facilities and homes within Anchorage. Also, by reducing those barriers, we will come in alignment with higher ratios for students and children. Right now, the municipality has lower ratios, so it is harder to seek out childcare. We also know that childcare is extremely expensive. And so trying to look at how do we leverage the ACE funds as we work through these code changes.
I have a question for you, Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks. It's actually kind of just a series of comments on this, but I know this work came up as we worked on the ACE Fund, and this is one of many projects that I've been reached out to work on, and I haven't had time, so I'm glad you guys are picking that up. I think just to offer some general thoughts on this, from what we understand the problems to be, existing providers have to close. So I think that's kind of one set of questions is how do we expand their capacity? And I think we're looking at the school district really increasing ratios, right? And I know that's not ideal, but I think, there's an argument to say is it better to have care or is it better to have perfect care? And so I think that's one place to look. Another one is really focusing on how new folks start up. And we know there's so many issues with, we've heard the wheel you get stuck on, you need a lease before you can get your license and vice versa, all these things. And so really thinking about maybe how to boost in-home care and folks who are willing to do that on their own property at a smaller scale. I think that was one that we talked about a lot with the ACE Fund group. Just what's realistic? How do we reuse buildings? How do we expand folks who are already operating? And then how do we expand home care, knowing that really the burden to start up a new center is very high, cost and everything else. So I think there's a way, obviously you're going to look holistically, but I think really focusing on what are the shorter term or what are things that can move forward faster? Maybe it's multiple ordinances as well. Cause I think there's like other things like a development, there's multiple problems to solve here. And so really just parsing those out. And I think the faster you can move, the better. And if I can be helpful, please let me know. Thanks.
Thanks. Just for the record, Mr. Constant has joined us. I don't see any other people in the queue. I have I'm curious about your process. I'm curious about, sounds like that this is going to be a comprehensive process to review and try to align and remove barriers. Can you talk to us about a timeline, sort of who's involved in that, and how do you see that unfolding and when you see the recommendations coming forward?
Yeah, great questions. So we actually started this process 2024 in the middle of the year. We sent out a survey to administrators asking them for their thoughts on 16.55. So what they liked, what they didn't. So we do have some of that data already. And when I kind of began the conversation starting with Q3 to Q4, because we really need to look at and working with our state partners, looking at their code and seeing what we can align with and what we cannot. So some things we just cannot. We have an appeals process here at the local level. And so my thought is to really continually to bring updates to the body through this forum on a monthly basis. And then hopefully by, I would say, August, really have something substantial in order to put forth, taking into account Assemblymember Brawley's recommendation of kind of taking smaller chunks. That is something that we can definitely look at and see if we can do that and start peeling off those little layers little by little. And then bringing those forth in this forum, so that when it does come to a vote, on a Tuesday night, it's not something that's new for the whole body to kind of review.
And what role do you see this new ACE board playing in this process, both from the perspective of funding and in terms of accessing their expertise and role?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is something that we can definitely engage with. I know that we do have a staff member that attends those board meetings. So most certainly I can probably have our program manager start to engage in that forum and or division manager to really receive the feedback as we continue to move through that process. And that's a great idea. In regards to the ACE funds, we do have those within the health department. And we have 2 RFPs that have recently closed. We have one that's coming up for the pilot programs and really kind of looking at how that plays into it later on, I think. Because I think the biggest piece that we're missing is data. And, we had talked about that in the implementation teams that we don't have a lot of data. And so with these RFPs, we're hoping that that is something we can continue to collect and then improve upon. And so while I'm hoping that we can do this work this year, maybe what the future looks like is totally different and we need to adapt and change in the upcoming years.
Yeah, thanks. Just a comment that it seems like there's a strong alignment between the purpose of the ACE board and what you're trying to accomplish. And I think the original discussion or the ACE fund was getting more funding into this sort of world to see if we could make some changes. But it sounds like that it's also about aligning policies and changing policies and creating incentives and doing all of those things that will help as well. So thanks for the update. Any other questions from the body? Yes, Ms. Brawley.
Sorry, just one other suggestion. Maybe also thinking about, to the extent that there's existing providers with a good track record who are trying to expand versus somebody who's brand new and there's just more risk inherent with that. Is there a way to streamline or waive requirements or process requirements for those folks? I think that's just another question to ask, and that would be on a time limited basis. And again, all of these conversations really are about risk tolerance all around. But I think just thinking about how to leverage, good operators and getting out of their way as soon as possible is another kind of option. Thank you.
And thanks for bringing that forward. We appreciate it. Look forward to updates in the future meetings. Okay, next up we have the Anchorage Police Department. Would you like to come up, please? Welcome, Chief Case. And I know you'll be probably in the conversation later in the agenda during the mayor's office, but you only have one item on the agenda for this section. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Go before it.
So as the state legislative session starts to move forward, Senate Bill 53 has already been introduced. And when that starts getting movement, which I hope it does, I want to flag that for this body and ask for support of Senate Bill 53. It's being introduced by Senator Gray Jackson, and that is a statewide accreditation bill. And so just to kind of give you some background on what that looks like, as of earlier, end of last year, there was a grant that was given to the Alaska Municipal League that had to do with a statewide police policy manual. And so there's an effort right now putting that manual together, which would make sure that it's consistent with case law here in Alaska, right to privacy, Ninth Circuit, all of that sort of stuff. So if you're in a police department in the state of Alaska, you could adopt that policy and then modify it as you see fit to fit your jurisdiction, but at least we'd have some base policies throughout the state. What Senate Bill 53 does is it adds some accreditation standards, if you will, to that policy. So even though there would be a state policy manual that you could adopt, you can do anything you want to that manual. An accreditation system would ensure that certain best practices are maintained within that policy manual. Even if you were to modify it, you couldn't modify those accreditation standards. And this bill allows for a 3-tiered system. So if you think about the challenges that we have in Alaska, particularly the difference between what urban and rural is to us in this state, which is pretty significant, that the lower level of tier 1 would be a lower level standard where even if you're in very, very rural parts of Alaska, best practices for operational standards. So making sure that, if you have prisoners, they're cared for in a certain way, and certain policies that are operational or existence throughout the entire state. And then as you get to tier 2 and tier 3, those would start to impact larger jurisdictions that have the staffing or the administrative abilities to kind of have a higher level of standards throughout their manual. So both of these together would ensure that statewide we can count on somewhere between 80 standards are going to be consistent throughout the state of Alaska in our policy manuals. And Senate Bill 53 makes it a mandatory that all states have to get the lowest level at a minimum tier 1 accreditation. So as this moves forward and we start to get hearings, I just ask in advance that the body supports this bill.
Thanks. Yes, Ms. Brawley.
Thanks. To that point, I would love to learn more about this bill, but I am drafting an email right now suggesting that we perhaps work on a resolution of support for the 25th. So just to say, there's some interest there.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks. Ms. Bonga.
Thanks. Does this in any way, so I'm thinking about teaching accreditation usually offers raises to teachers that go to another level of accreditation than just regular teaching certificate. Is there any part to that? And where the organization that's providing the accreditation, what is the organization that provides it?
So it won't impact wages because this is for the organization and not the individual teachers and certifications in your example, or the officers and their certification level. So it's just for the organization. And what the bill is based on, and as it's written in the bill, is standards from CALIA, which is a nationally recognized federal accreditation standard that is, they have about 170 standards. It's also a pretty costly kind of certification to obtain. And so having an Alaska specific accreditation system will allow us to do it at a cost that's feasible throughout the state. One of the requests that I have is that there's also a fiscal note attached to it so that agencies can meet the standard if they're required to and not have to be overburdensome. And again, thinking about those small agencies throughout the state. So it's based on kind of a larger body, and we would tailor it a little bit more to the Alaska needs, but the base standards will come out of that system. Thanks.
I just have a couple questions myself. I can see the advantage or the benefit of this for departments across the state. Can you just speak specifically to Anchorage and why this would be a benefit to our department?
I don't believe that there's going to be any standards that we don't already have. I support this because I think it's just part of my responsibility as the chief of the largest police agency to be examples for the law enforcement agencies around the state. And so that's really the position and role that we're playing in. And I think it also just makes it for an easier conversation when you see policy manuals that are posted online throughout the state in other areas of the country, and they get brought forward and we get asked questions. Why don't you have this line in here? Why is this policy at APD different from some other agency in the state of Alaska? And it helps kind of consolidate. Although we're spread out and we're different, we're still all under the same Alaska State Constitution, the same state statutes, and there's very little municipal or borough jurisdictions that have different rules. So generally speaking, when it comes to how we do police operations, there's a lot of consistency that we can have.
Okay, and just the final thing is just it'd be wonderful to have access to. Is there a website? Is there a place that we would be able to see these policies, this accreditation? Is there more information that we can get?
So right now, the bill is just a bill, so we don't have those accreditation standards. Certainly, you can look at CALIA's website to kind of give an idea what that looks like. And the statewide policy manual, as that gets developed, we'll be adopting that manual. And so like our current manual that we post online.
Okay. And you don't see significant changes to our current policies if we were to adopt this?
The manual or the accreditation?
So that we would be adopting a new manual with the accreditation, or our accreditation, you think we would fit our existing manual?
The accreditation would fit our existing manual, and it will also definitely fit the statewide manual, but we will be adopting the statewide manual as well, because, again, try to set an example for the rest of the
Yeah,
state.
but
It's-
I think you said earlier, you don't expect significant changes in what we do or how we do it based on this. Is that correct?
Correct. We currently meet the standards that I would anticipate that Alaska would adopt. We already meet those standards.
Okay. I think that's all the questions on this topic. I know Mr. Constant has a question on a different topic. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, thanks, Chief. Way back in the Doll days, we used to get a report that was kind of tracking certain sets of crime over time. And it was every month. We didn't need it that much, but maybe it's possible to get an email report with some kind of data over time, what the trends are looking like last 3 years, last 5 years, last 10 years.
Absolutely. I can get that for you.
And I think I recall that
Thank
there was
you.
thanks, Mr. Constant. There was a rhythm to that. There was what is that? What would be the most normal sort of time frame for you to bring that forward for us? Would it be monthly, quarterly? What would be something that would work best for you?
So the rhythm that we'd gotten into in the past was kind of a quarterly rhythm. I think the challenge that we all felt, if we've been to enough of the meetings, was the slides kind of went up, and there was also a cadence and rhythm to the questions that we would get, which is, so what? Like, what does this mean compared to last
Yep.
time
Right.
versus this time?
Right.
So certainly when we put it out, we'll try to create kind of a comparison of where we've been. Typically when people like to talk about how crime has changed over time, I always go back to like the mid to late 90s, when if you've been here long enough,
Yep.
you really think about when crime started really going up. And so that's always kind of a good comparison for us here in the state as to where we are now compared to then. Not that I want to go back to that time, but that kind of puts it in perspective. And then the other thing with our data, which we'll be moving forward to throughout the course of this year, is it's not all about the crime data. It's also about collecting data from the public that is kind of the emotional aspect that the community has. What's the fear that we have, and how do we measure that? And how do we go out? Are we afraid or not afraid to go out in our neighborhood? And what neighborhoods are those? So that's also gives us a lot of context behind that data. So we'll start putting that out as that becomes available to us, which should be about June, July of this year.
Yeah, and you and I.
If I
talked about-
might quickly, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I will note that we intentionally moved away from spending too much time going over regularized reports at the committee. And I think that was a wise move, so that we could use the committee for more kind of focused initiatives. So I'm not asking to have a briefing quarterly on the crime stats, but rather just to receive the information. And then if anything pops out, to have a briefing at request.
Thank you.
Understood, sir.
Yep, thanks. And I just wanted to add that I know that one of your priorities this year is data, and so I do believe in the addition to getting something in email, it would be nice for you and I to work on a time frame for when you can bring some of that information forward to this committee. So that'd be helpful. Thanks. Any other items for you? Yeah. Oh, I've got a question over. Yes, Ms. Bronca.
This is just a weird question, but what are people doing with laundry soap that they need to be locked up in Fred Meyer?
It's a great question. I don't have an answer for that right
Okay.
now.
Like, whoa.
If you Google it, you can learn a lot. Why people are stealing Tide? Yeah. All right. Then thank you, sir, for your time. Okay.
Yeah, it's because it's expensive and it's an essential, like baby food and other items.
People are reselling it. Yeah. Okay. The Amherst Fire Department, Chief Shoggy, welcome. Welcome, sir. All right, and you have 2 items on our agenda today.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Doug Schrage with the Anchorage Fire Department. I just wanted to bring 2 items of future interest to your attention. These are future funding needs that will probably be in front of you in the coming months or years. The first one is the ongoing and continual funding of our Wildfire Mitigation Office. Just for context, our wildfire office was closed in 2008, and very little meaningful work has been done to affect the wildfire safety on the front range of the Chugach Range in the intervening time. We received a $4 million in federal funding that is being managed as a U.S. Forest Service grant that we received in 2023. And so we've actively been ramping up our activities and accomplishments in that amount of time. So just since roughly October of 2024, we have procured wildland PPE for our crews. We've stood up the woodlot. We have entered into an agreement with a contractor to rewrite the community wildfire protection plan, which, as you probably know, is a condition for future wildfire funding and other funding sources. We've done a complete needs assessment, a division strategic plan, a tremendous amount of community engagement with the community councils and other community interest groups, developed a prioritized fuels treatment plan, begun data tracking, and we have reinforced connections with the Division of Forestry, Bureau of Land Management, and JBER. And what we're worried about is when the federal funding runs out in 2027, that if we don't begin thinking about this now, that we will be right back where we are in another 8 or 10 years after that. And with recent events in Los Angeles County, and before that in Lahaina, and before that in Paradise, these were all multiple fatality fires that have conditions that are not, they would not be unexpected in the municipality. And so I'm just asking you to think ahead about future funding needs for this operation. And we still have a couple years to go, but the time to be thinking about that is now.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have a sense of what it would cost on an annual basis to sustain the program?
I do. We think in $2025, if we were to fully build this out the way we think it should be built out, it would be nearly $1 million a year. Right now, we have just one employee, and it's our the wildfire manager that we hired in October. He's joining us in the gallery here today. And so we're not spending that much now, but that's how much we feel like we should be. The budget that was submitted with the grant application included budgeting for 3 positions and some equipment and materials and supplies. So we haven't yet filled the other 2 positions, but right now we're spending much less than that. But we think if we fully built it out, it'd be just under $1 million a year.
And follow-up question, I know there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to federal funding right now, but if we think back to the world we were in a couple weeks ago, especially, you know, by the time we get to 2027 and the money runs out, we should have the CWPP then, right? Are you looking at federal sources that we can go after to kind of, I mean, obviously we pay the 1 million locally, right? But are you also looking at other grant opportunities or other funding streams that we could target, or are we just sort of assuming that this is going to need to be operationalized in the local budget?
Yes, thank you, Member Johnson, through the chairs. Good question. Yeah, Chief Glover and our staff are aggressively pursuing other grants. We have a number of applications out. We also have been, the Office of Emergency Management has been very successful at securing FEMA funds that we can use for some of these efforts. So we feel like the long-term vision should be that this is a major component of our overall mission, and it should be fully operationalized into our operating budget and not dependent on grants for ongoing salaries and operational expenses. And that way it would free up the future grant opportunities for project work, such as fuels removal and ingress and egress and fire breaks and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I just have a couple questions for you before you move on. I'm really interested in we may want to plan at some point a work session on sort of an update on the needs assessment you did, the strategic plan, the community assessment, and really giving us a better sense of what the need is and what the reality is around this. And I think there's something that will be really helpful as we prepare to look at funding this internally. And I think that because I'm really curious about the trends over the last decade and what we've seen change and the real risk that we face as a city. So that may be something that we can work together on planning in preparation for some of these asks that we're going to have in the next year or two. And so, but I'm particularly curious about the work that you've already done and to sort of establish what that need is and why it's so vital. I mean, I've had conversations with my constituents about it, and certainly those that have been around, especially the south side of town, know that need very well. But it would be helpful, I think, to have a broader understanding as a city of what this real need is.
Yes, thank you for those comments. We would, if I can respond, we would certainly welcome that opportunity. We're very proud of the work that's being done and the amount of work that's been done in a very short amount of time. And we're basically on the shoulder of the coming wildfire season, and we have a lot of work to do.
Well, and I just would add, and I know we have another question, but I would just add that unfortunately, it's often something that until something large happens, like the ones you've mentioned in Los Angeles and others, or if it happens in your own area, it's out of sight, out of mind. And so I think it's our job to make sure that all of us in Anchorage are aware of it and see it as a priority. So I'd appreciate it. Ms. Brawley.
Thanks. Yeah, I know that was a big topic down in Juneau, and I think there's a fair amount of interest in some version of the state stepping up and helping with that. TBD what that looks like. My two questions. One is, do we have any concerns about our current federal grants being on pause or whatever the term is right now, or are those outside of the scope of that issue? And then also, I know there's a state supplemental budget with some, it generally includes a bunch of disaster relief money. Is there anything in Anchorage in that budget that you're aware of, retroactively paying for things? Because I know Southeast, there was a lot of other kind of disasters that happened, and the money is for that, but I don't know if there's an Anchorage component to that. Thanks.
Thank you for those questions, Member Brawley, through the chair. To the first question about the uncertainty of federal funding, the answer is we don't know. Chief Glover has reached out to his contacts in the Forest Service, and they're just as uncertain as we are. So we don't really know. At this point, we're not really concerned about it. I think that it's not that we're not concerned, but we're not worried. Until they tell us that the money is not available to us, we're going to keep doing the work that we're doing. And I think that that picture will become clearer just with time. As I don't need to tell any of you that. To your second question about supplemental state funding, I don't know the answer to that, but that's something that I'll explore. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Jones.
Just to follow up on Member Brawley's question, if there was a freeze on federal grant, I mean, how much money do we have in hand to sustain the program? Let's assume tomorrow that the directive we saw last week came back again. How quickly will we run out of money to continue to operate the wildland management program?
Thank you, Member Johnson. If it indulges the chair, can I have Chief Glover come up here and maybe he can answer that? I honestly don't know if we've received the grant in a lump sum or if it's on a reimbursable basis. So maybe John can answer that question. Put yourself on the record.
Good morning, John Glover, Division Chief for the Wildland Program with Anchorage Fire Department. To answer the question, the way the status of the grant works right now, we submit a cost of our accomplishments, and then we are reimbursed through that program. So that would essentially dry up.
Okay, thank you.
And just for clarification, you spend the money first, and then you seek reimbursement for that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. All right, thank you, Chief. I don't see any other questions. Do you want to go on? You have one more?
I have one more item. I'll move quickly. The second item is a shorter time horizon, and that is as you may be aware, we have 18 firefighters that are currently being funded through a federal grant, the Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response. It's a FEMA grant, $10.3 million over 3 years. We have 1 year left on the grant, a year and just a couple of weeks left. And we need to be thinking during calendar year 2025, during this budget season, about the disposition of those firefighters. We're not eligible to apply for another grant for the same purpose. And so I just want to be clear that in the absence of a different source of funding for those 18 positions, we will have to attrit them out over the course of the next year. And so that grant funding runs out during February of 2026.
Chief, can you just tell us what is SAFER? What does that stand for?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. It's Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response. This is a fire department funding grant that was born out of September 11th, 2001 to help fire departments to staff up their fire departments, firefighters.
And can you just give us a scope of currently what it funds now?
It pays the full salary and benefits of 18 firefighters. Six of them are on duty every day.
Yes, Ms. Brawley.
And can you remind me, is this the same grant that's essentially paying for what people call a 4-pack to have 4 officers per truck?
Yes,
per-
Member Barley, through the chair, one and the same.
And then, sorry, I might have missed it. When does this grant run out? Can you remind me?
In just about 1 year and 2 weeks,
Thank you.
February 23rd of 26.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
And if memory serves me, we did increase the number of, I guess we'll say PCNs, if that's the term used, positions in AFD for these firefighters. They're just not funded positions at this point. Is that correct? But that they do exist in AFD. So it wouldn't be, if we're contemplating this as we're looking at next year's budget, it wouldn't be about adding positions to AFD. It would be about providing just the funding to pay for them. Am I?
That is
framing
my
that right?
understanding as well.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
through the chair.
Thanks.
And Chief, do you foresee a process, knowing that this is coming, do you see a process from here on for the next year? Where do you see that a discussion happening for how we adjust to this funding change? Is that a conversation you're having with the administration now?
Yes, everything that I've discussed here today has been discussed with the administration. So we recruit for our academy in the fall of each year. Starting in around end of August or September, we begin accepting applications. We hire our employees in November and December timeframe. And then they start the academy in January of the following year. So we have 18 firefighters candidates in the 2025 academy, which started just last month. Next year, we would normally hire about the same. We hire 18 to 24 each year, starting in January of each year. So in the 2026 operating budget planning activities, if we learn that we don't have certainty around funding for those positions, we would simply not hold an academy in 2026. Or if we hold an academy, it would be for just the number that we need above 18. And we would just attrit those people out over time. We would not lay them off, but we would use them to fill current and future vacancies.
Just a second. I think I have Mr. Constant. Did you have a question?
Yes, I think that the chief just answered it. He used a verb that I didn't understand, and I thought it maybe was garbled, but it was attrit. And so the theory of change is if there is no additional funding, we just reduce the total number going forward. So I think, thanks, that's it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I don't see any additional questions. Anything else for you, sir?
No, thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thanks. Thank you for your report. Appreciate it. Okay, moving on. We are going to, I think, now move on to the mayor's office. If those members want to come up, and also if I believe Chief Case, probably you want to come up as well. I think there's some items that will be you'll be helpful with as well. All right, welcome, welcome. Let's see, so we've got 3 items on here. I apologize, they didn't make it on the printed, but just in order, we've got the first, the OIS outside investigator recommendations. Oh, thanks for putting it up there. Appreciate it. And then the other 2. So does that work for you in terms of the order you'd like to do to address them?
Yes, that's fine unless you'd like a general update from the mayor's office.
Right, right. Well, you have the floor.
Thanks. This is Thea Agnew Benben, Special Assistant to the Mayor. Just a quick update that we are about to be able to provide a copy of the Mayor's Public Safety Strategy. We've had really great engagement with many different departments, and so we've been taking our time to really kind of catalog the work that's already in process and the work that is upcoming, so that we have a really good plan that we can monitor over time and report back on. So we'll be sharing a version of that with you shortly, probably before this committee meets again. It'll come to you in some fashion, and then we can give a better presentation on it at our next meeting.
Great. Thanks for the update. And I want to add a comment on that in terms of the role of this committee as it relates to that. I think that we've been discussing, as you've seen in the agenda today, bringing forward items that are relevant to potential action from the assembly, either in the short term or the long term. So items that eventually will reach us in terms of a decision that we'll have to make, but also using this time as a way to talk about the strategic priorities that the city has for the next year or 2 years related to public safety. And so I think that document will serve as a guide for that and allow us to align our work as an assembly and as administration and thinking about what those priorities are and how we can move them forward. So looking forward to seeing that and using that as a framework to discuss things at this meeting. So thanks.
Hello, everyone. So I put 2 items on the agenda. One is a memorandum that Member Rivera put into the Assembly regular meeting in January that contains a press release from my office, as well as a set of recommendations involving APD, and the other is an RFP. And these are all both out in the public, in the world, but since they are squarely within what this committee is interested in, thought it'd be a good idea to bring them here too, primarily to see if anyone has questions about the process that went into either one of them or has questions about what they contain. And both of these are part of the two layers of outside review that the mayor and Chief Case announced in August relating to officer-involved shootings. So one, the document attached to the memorandum is the product of an outside investigator who came in to work with APD-IA and direct the investigation of the August 13th officer-involved shooting that resulted in the death of Easter Leafa. And so the majority of the full report that he prepared, Mr. Darcy, is not available because that is personal information. It's strictly protected under municipal code. However, he did work to make a public-facing set of recommendations for policy changes at APD based on his review. So that's one document. There are 11 recommendations in there, and Chief Case is prepared to speak to if and how they have been operationalized. And the other document is the other layer of outside review, which is a policy review, a more comprehensive review of APD's policies, procedures, tactics, supervision, training, as they relate to use of force and de-escalation. So that is the RFP for that. It's open now, and it's open until February 13th. We gave it, about 45 days open to make sure that we would get out there in the world and hopefully get us a good slate of contractors.
Right. Well, why don't we start with the item, and Mr. Rivera, you're bringing this forward. Would you like to speak to that to kind of get us started, and then maybe we can focus on that one first?
Thanks. Yeah, this is an item that was brought forward at the, I believe it was the last assembly meeting, and it was approved. So it's essentially an informational memorandum to inform the public of both the press release and the report that was done. So I appreciate that information getting out to the public. If I may, Mr. Chair, can I ask a question related to the RFP? Thank you. So, yeah, I appreciate the administration's willingness to have back and forth discussions regarding the RFP, and appreciate that that will be closing next week, next Thursday. Does the administration have a target date that you will be getting that RFP to the assembly for approval? Not the RFP, but the actual selection.
Yeah, I don't think we have a specific time deadline in mind right now. I think we are planning to move through it as quickly as possible. So we'll assemble our, scoring committee, do the scoring, work through the negotiation process, and then come to you. So we are hoping to move through it quickly.
Great. I think for my part, especially given a lot of the back and forth that we have, I think the sooner that we can get some clear direction on what will be the contractor will be doing and what they won't be doing would be helpful. So that if there are pieces that they won't be doing, then interested assembly members can find alternate ways to get that done. Thanks.
Just to respond to that, I think that I have had some side conversations with members, and I'm happy to kind of have those one-on-one follow-ups as well, so that even before it gets to the point of being fully ready, we might be able to talk about some of that.
Thanks. I want to go back to the Assembly Information Memorandum, specifically the report by Christopher Darcy. And I fully understand the confidential nature of this. And I guess what I'm hoping to just get a little bit of more information, maybe from the chief or from you. The recommendations that are listed out here, I'm interested in the relationship between these recommendations and the current actions that are being taken already within the department, and also the relationship between these recommendations and the RFP, if there is a relationship there in terms of making sure there's information being shared among those. So those are the two questions. One is are these things we're already doing, or were these some of these things we're not doing and now we're doing because there's a recommendation? Maybe you can speak to that first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there's a lot of overlapping things that are happening. The document that we put out on a 15 review of the officer involved shootings, the police department had some recommendations in. You'll see that some of them overlap with what's happening in Mr. Darcy's report. And then we also have a staffing study that we've got back that will become a document you'll have access to here in the coming weeks. They also have recommendations in that as well. And then with this RFP, you should see some recommendations that will also overlap, but they're going to have their own threads as well. We have started last year, and as of yesterday, we started another scenario, one of 8 that are going to address all of the issues in the 15-year officer involved shooting report that we did, as well as all of Mr. Darcy's. So as we move throughout the year, this will probably be an email update that you'll all want unless you have questions, but we'll all be able to reference this report as well as our 15-year, as well as our staffing study, and eventually we'll roll in the RFP and the recommendations that we get there. So you'll be able to kind of track and monitor what types of recommendations we've accepted and how we've rolled that into policy and training. You can also anticipate that as the year moves forward. I mentioned the 8 different scenarios that are addressed to operationalize some of these changes, that we may put out an offer to let some of the members take a look at some of those scenarios, because there's no secret in a lot of what we're doing and how we're doing it, so that you can just kind of understand what that training looks like when we have something that's written down. Then we create a policy change, and then a change in practice, how we train our officers to move forward with that.
I know I have a question on the queue. Just wanted just to follow up clarifying question. So It sounds like there's a lot of things going on, but specifically related to these recommendations have been accepted, and the recommendations are being incorporated into the work you're doing. And there will be a report at some point where you're sharing sort of what's being done in each one of these areas, whether there's a change or whether there's a new training or whether there's something new. There'll be a follow-up to this specifically. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's what I wanted to have. Ms. Rowley, do you have a question?
Yeah, I want to go back to the RFP, and I'll also acknowledge this is an active procurement, so I imagine there's limits on what you can say, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Looking at the phase one, I guess the general scope of this appears to really be internal to APD. So I'm wondering kind of what you all contemplate. It mentions key informant stakeholder interviews, kind of what you contemplate engagement would be with entities outside outside the department, outside the municipality, like the general public. And I'm asking because I think I understand that's not the scope of this, but I just want to ask, and again, recognizing it's an active solicitation. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, and the goal of this really is a very, I'm not going to say overly technical, but it is supposed to be an intensive review of, if an officer makes the decision to pull the trigger on their firearm, what are the inputs that have gone into that decision, and seeing are there different ways of doing things at APD that could, influence that. So this really is primarily internally focused. With that said, right, how officers interact with members of the public is part of that, and so that's why there is an aspect of community involvement here. And Thea can speak more about to unpack that. I think you're talking about phase one, number 2 there. And I know that there is interest from members in having a broader level of community engagement. And that's something that we have committed to explore in the contract negotiation process. And also committed to considering if it's not possible to roll it into this RFP, because this request does ask a lot. We're already a little bit concerned that contractors may not be able to do everything we are already asking. But if it's not possible to work it into this particular contract, if there is a way to do it, we'll explore that as well.
Thanks. Thanks. And I just wanted to sort of state for the record that we're kind of jumping back and forth between items. And so I just want to, for those that are listening, it may be a little bit confusing. So Ms. Braga, you have a question?
Yes.
And
So I was,
maybe talk about specifically what item you're talking about so we know.
okay, I was looking at the Christopher Darcy Critical Incident Review, and on the there was one about something about reality-based, I think it's recommendation 7, enhanced reality-based training. Is that I haven't gone through this whole other RFP. Is there a portion of this that's going to provide that reality-based training, or this is just another look into the policies of APD? On the January 2nd request for proposal, does that address the items in Mr. Darcy's report, especially the recommendations that he's made?
Sure. And just to, thanks for the question, to distinguish, the Darcy report is very specific to the August 13th incident. So that was what would normally be a purely internal review of that. We did bring in an outside investigator. So that is arising out of the review of that incident specifically, whereas the RFP is for a broader review of APD's, policies, practices, procedures, training, all those things. So we expect that in phase 1 for the RFP, research and analysis, that's where the contractor will review all the information that APD has already brought together. And so the contractor will have Mr. Darcy's recommendations, and will take those into account and use them as the body, part of the base of knowledge that they will build off of to then produce a broader set of recommendations.
I almost feel like we need a graphic to it'd be helpful here, but I just wanted to sort of clarify that yeah. So the Christopher Darcy recommendations are for that particular incident, but the recommendations are part of a larger effort within the department of doing a variety of sort of new things and reviewing training and policies and a variety of things that are going on already, regardless of this. And there is an RFP to go out for another sort of external process to make recommendations about potential changes or improvements within the department. So there's a recommendations from one incident. There's a series of things that are already going on within the department that have been by the department, and then there's an RFP to go out to gather more information from the public and from others to make recommendations for our department to improve. So 3 different sort of boxes, right? And I guess one of the questions I would ask is, I think we had tried to schedule previously a work session where Chief, you and your team could come forward and give the assembly sort of a full look at what's going on, what steps you're taking, what changes are being made, that sort of thing. And I'm curious about whether that's something that we want to schedule at some point when it feels like you're ready to do that. Because I think there's a lot of us that are really interested in knowing more about that, of what recommendations have been received so far, what things are in place, what changes are being made, that sort of thing. Is that something you feel like that we could schedule in the near future?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. All right, so I can work with you and the mayor's office to figure out a time for us to do that. I think that would be helpful for us to see sort of all these pieces coming together and how they fit. Are there any questions specifically about the Christopher Darcy recommendations that came through? Okay. All right. And anything else on these for you in terms of can you share with us the time frame you see for the RFP? When you see that going out and when we can expect to have something in place?
I'm going to take a quick moment to review the RFP because I think we did have some target dates in there. Just want to make sure I'm accurate.
Mr. Rivera, your text is from previous, yeah. Went in the queue. Yeah, okay, thanks.
So the RFP does state that ideally the review would be completed within 6 months of when the contract is awarded or executed. So it's a lot of work. So
Yeah.
we don't want to rush it, but 6 months
6 months from.
contract, when the contract is signed.
Oh, okay.
We
So,
expect-
and when, I mean, can you give us a sense of when you think that might be?
I think that should be within the next 2 months.
Okay.
Again,
All
we'll
right.
move through the procurement process as quickly as we can.
We're
Closes February
we're looking
13th.
at 8 months before this is finished.
Yes, but as you'll notice, there are different phases of it. And
Right.
so there will be a degree of reporting out on each phase.
Got it. Okay. Thanks very much. All right. Any other questions on the RFP from members? Okay. And then finally, do we already cover that? Do we already cover the APD policy review, or is that we did? Anything else? Anything else? Okay, great. All right. I think we got it. Anything else from you guys?
You skipped over Department of Law on the agenda,
Oh.
but Mr. Wheeler is here if you
Oh,
would
wonderful.
like a prosecution update.
That's great. I appreciate that. Well, thank you very much for your time today. I look forward to getting more information in the future. Mr. Wheeler, welcome. And just for those watching, my assumption, because I didn't receive emails from the Department of Law or OEM, that there was no report today. So is there anybody from OEM here today? You are back there. Okay, great. I apologize for skipping over. I made that assumption, but I will, as soon as we're done here, I'll have everybody come up and give an update. Okay, thank you. Mr. Wheeler, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Through the chair, assembly members. I'm going to use a swimming analogy. So when I got here in October, we were drowning. I think at this point we're treading water. The next step is to start actually swimming in one direction. To that end, you may recall that we had picked up 4 attorneys last summer and fall, all brand new to the practice of law. Some of them were still pending their bar results, etc. One of them is taking the bar this month. So while the staffing came up a little bit last year, we needed to recognize that that wasn't the same as having experienced attorneys who could handle cases all by themselves in high volume. One of those attorneys moved on to work for JAG, And like I said, the other one's out right now pending taking the bar in the next couple of weeks. So to move forward into the swimming mode, we have been fortunate enough to pick up 4 more attorneys. 3 of them will start this month. They all have experience. They have all prosecuted misdemeanor crimes. 2 of them doing so here in the Muni, another one down in Juneau. And then the 4th person will come on in March after they finish up some state trial level work. So we're very excited to bring on 4 very experienced attorneys to help us now move forward faster. In the meantime, we are still working with contractors in a number of capacities. We have a contractor who is filtering out a ton of old cases that were just laying stagnant in our office. It wasn't that they hadn't been through the court process, but they were clogging up our case management system and physically clogging up our office space because they're paper files. We have another contractor who's a retired former municipal prosecutor here for Anchorage who's been under contract. He attends pre-trial and trial conferences. Those take 6 hours apiece and they happen every week. It's a huge drain on our attorneys' ability to screen their own cases and try cases when they have to go to those long court proceedings that happen every week. And so he's been using his experience to not only handle those hearings, but challenge the defense on whether they're ready for trial and get rid of cases that we should have screened out in the process earlier. So he's making some great headway there. We have another contractor, former retired Judge Stephanie Rhodes, who helped develop some of the therapeutic courts that are used here in Anchorage. She is training our newer attorneys to take on the therapeutic court roles. There's 4 courts that we cover that provide mental health services. And so she's been a great resource to us to help train up new attorneys because she's so very familiar with the rules and regulations and the processes. We're very fortunate to have her, and she will hopefully stay with us as long as we need her. So in the contracting realm, I hope to continue to use those resources, and you may see amendments to their current contracts to kind of get this into, well, the contracts are currently set to go through the end of the year, but the funding with them will have to be adjusted. So you'll see us again asking for funding adjustments to those contracts, hopefully into June, and I hope to reassess sometime between late March and early June as to whether we'll continue to need those services or not, or if the new attorneys coming in can manage that workload and we can let the contractors go back into retirement if they'd like to. That's kind of where we are, sir. Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, I appreciate the update. I'd love to, we can take this all offline and you and I can have a conversation on the side on this, but one of the things I'm curious about is similar to the conversation we were having with Chief Case, like as a sort of, as a governing body, what are the sort of data points that we should be looking at to know that our Department of Law is functioning effectively? You know, what are sort of the things that we should be looking at to know that we're doing what we need to be doing and functioning? Because as your point, going from drowning to treading water to swimming, and what are those sort of key indicators that we should be looking at? And you don't have to. I mean, you can answer me now, but I don't need to go through it today. But I'm curious about that because I'd love to make sure that we're hearing those and knowing what those are. Knowing what an effective office looks like and how it's really functioning in an effective way, knowing that our office has in the previous past not functioned as well as it should have. So just want to share that.
Mr. Chairman, one of the key indicators was part of the news that came out in the fall that we had cases where we were simply not resolving them within the speedy trial requirement of 120 days. And the end result of that is victims don't get justice. Defendants don't receive the consequences for their actions. We have made great inroads into reducing the number of cases that are not getting to trial on time or getting resolved on time. So that's one benchmark. The other benchmarks will be comparing case resolutions, time to trial, what kind of result do you get, how many go to trial and we win, how many go to trial and we don't win, motion work, all those kinds of data points that we provide in our PVRs. The problem has been, from my perspective coming in, is that so much of that data wasn't being captured when the staffing fell apart. Part of the project I described earlier is one of the contractors is catching up all that old data from cases from 1999 through 2017 and to current, getting those all cleaned up, getting all the data into the system. Once you do that, you can start looking at pre-COVID case counts, current case counts, and start taking percentages, right? So if we resolved 90% of cases by X date from the time they were filed, back in a 5-year span pre-COVID and we're doing somewhere near that now, you might say we're swimming. So that's, once we get that data clean up here in the next few months, I hope we can produce numbers that actually mean something and are accurate.
And it would be great to work with you on the timing of that when you're able to bring that forward. Ms. Gardner, did you have a comment?
Just to summarize, I think 3 things to look at would be staffing turnover rates, which have been extraordinarily high in the last few years, but are turning around. Because that gives an indication of stability and ability to keep functioning. The case open date to timeline, so the duration, right, that we have cases open, and the dismissal rate, which I think the hope is to get the speedy trial dismissal rate down to not an issue. I also just want to say a huge thank you to Mr. Wheeler. He has done an incredible job corralling a really gigantic problem. And right now, if all the attorneys we expect show up, we'll only have 2 vacancies left in attorney spots, which is huge. And the strides he's made in improving office morale and just training levels of staff and attorneys have been really incredible. So he's been working very hard, very long hours to do all of that. I'm very grateful.
And Mr. Wheeler, we're I think the intention is moving forward to plan a very short pre-meeting to this meeting, of sort of 2 weeks or so out, to just discuss what we want to have on the agenda. If there's issues, I'd love to invite you to that meeting and to make sure that you're in that cycle with us. So if there's issues that you think are really important to bring to this meeting, we have them on the agenda.
Thank you, sir. Be happy to attend.
I do have one more quick update.
Sure, great.
It's related to prosecution, but not directly. As you know, we switched our defense contracts to the State of Alaska Public Defender Agency. That transition will be complete later this month. We've been having some overlap with our prior contractors. We'll have ongoing services with Turnagain Law, our conflict counsel, to carry over the cases that they already had. But yeah, the public defender transition should be complete later this month. There will be some bumps along the way, but we're looking forward to having that be in place smoothly for many years.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any additional questions. Hey, thanks for being here. Okay, Amanda, would you like to come up? Thanks. Hi, thanks for being here.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Amanda Loach. I'm the Director of the Office of Emergency Management. I just have a couple things to update you on today. We just finished a risk analysis in the Office of Emergency Management, and we are now currently up to 16 hazards in the municipality, which we were 12 before, documenting 12 before, and now we're up to 16. Those include hazards that are human caused, technological, and natural hazards. So we are working to apply emergency management standards across the board for all of those hazards. We have 2 items that will be coming to the agenda for approval. They're non-controversial. The first one is a grant for a cybersecurity plan to be included into the emergency operations plan. That's in partnership with the Office of with IT. And then as well, we have a grant coming. One is for the fire department to purchase for their hazardous materials team, radiological protective equipment for the firefighters, and as well a mass violence incident exercise funding for that as well. So those 2 items should be coming to the agenda shortly. That's my report. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Yes, Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thanks for those updates. One of the kind of themes of discussions we had in Juneau last week with legislators was, I mentioned wildfire funding, but also
The other benchmarks will be comparing.
I think connecting back to the point about readiness and really residents' readiness, there was, I'm just passing along a question, kind of what training is planned as far as, you know, that I know goes through your office, AFD, and others around, I think kind of wildfire response, evacuation, things like that. Just how can we continue to prioritize that is one question, and what's already happening. And then the other one is, I think, just along those same lines, kind of how can we assembly members help with residents' readiness, not just with fires, but in general, because I know that's a concern. Thanks.
Yeah, so it's not that mass violence incidents are the highest risk for our community. It's that's what the funding constrains us to. So I think you're aware that we do have a funding item in place by the state legislature, which is for wildfire planning, training, and exercising. And that will come into play over the next couple of years. But training and exercising costs money. We have alert systems in place that we can test if we train and talk about that with the public accordingly. But we do have a lot of events where we use those alert systems day to day. I'm sure some of you receive rave alerts all the time. So we do have a good understanding of how they function in our jurisdiction, and we continue to increase capability for those alert systems in working with national systems and implementing national systems and new plans along the way. Also, I should mention that mass violent incident will include public information components as well. So when we train and exercise for a certain type of hazard, it usually has applications for other hazards as well, if that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think it's the spirit of the question is not, should you be doing more? But I think we're not always aware, and then it's hard for us to communicate kind of what's already happening. And so and we've already flagged this as something for follow up to legislators in general, because there was a lot of concern about kind of what is Anchorage already doing. So we reassured them we're doing a lot, but I didn't have specifics. Thanks.
Thanks. And what are the new hazards that were identified?
Well, for example, the scientists just were able to discern that a rare but real hazard of tsunami exists for the city. And then as well, sometimes we delineate among other hazards. I can't name off the additional ones, but sometimes we will pull out a hazard as an individual addressed hazard, instead, like cyber is being added, et cetera. So we have a saying that we say plants get fatter, plants get skinnier. And so right now we're happy to say the plant's getting fatter. So we'll know more.
That's great. All right. I don't see any additional questions. Thanks for being here today.
Yes, sir.
Yep. Okay. I have a couple of other items on our agenda. We're going to move on to new business. Ms. Bronga, would you like to discuss AO 2024-77?
Yes, I'm hoping that Chief Case is here. So this came to my attention when Member Martinez and I were discussing problems with a vehicle that needs to be towed in Northeast that's been there for over 200 days. Turns out this will not be the fix for that, but it allowed Mindy McCulley to talk about the consequence of the AO 2024-77 that we passed September 10th, which gave people the one-time pass to their vehicles, or a pass to their vehicles to get their possessions. And it apparently has caused a real problem in towing, and I'll let Chief Case talk more to that.
Thank you, Member Bronga. So I'm going to be careful when I talk about this. I'm not advocating for tow companies or anything, but when this, prior to the vote, one of the things that I was asked was, do I support this? And I said, there's probably going to be a cost at some point that's associated with this. And we're at that point where there's probably a cost associated because we have a renewal that is up here in a couple months. There's 2 one-year renewals on the existing contract that already exists. And so the challenge that we're running into is it's kind of been signaled that our current vendor isn't going to renew, which that creates a towing problem because there's not a lot of opportunities or options in the city to handle the massive amount of tows that we do. And the tows that I'm specifically talking about are under 9.28, which are criminal tows. So think if somebody gets stopped for operating under the influence. And now it's important to point out that a couple of years ago, we revisited our policy on how we looked at 9.28 in our tows. So it was a mandatory tow under our policy several years ago, which meant if you got stopped for any of those things, we're automatically taking that car. The policy was reworked so that the officers make a couple of steps to attempt to release that vehicle to not only someone that's in the car and sober and licensed and insured to drive the car, but even calling somebody that can respond in a reasonable amount of time. And by reasonable amount of time, we say about how long it would take to get a tow truck there, so that those vehicles can be not impounded and not have to go through the charges and getting access and all that sort of stuff. So those things have already taken place in our policy, and I think that we've done everything we can on that front. So what happens right now is when the cars get impounded, they accrue fees every day, the tow, and then on top of all that, people come and get stuff out of their car that used to be a fee, but the car being pulled out in a location so that they can have access to it, light, cameras, staff, all that sort of stuff. A lot of these cars don't get picked back up. They don't get claimed, which means all of the collected money never gets collected. And so it's not just the fee of getting in that's kind of stacking up and contributing to this problem. It's the fact that we have cars that then go to auction to cover the fees that don't actually cover the fees. So there's a loss, and I won't get into the technical because I'm not a business owner, but there's a loss of the fees of auctioning the car, not covering the fees that should be collected based on the contract. And so this is just kind of one more layer to that again, been signaled to us that the contractor may not renew. So this is where the assembly may have to kind of battle what we do to try to attract a contractor if we can't get a contractor for this. Because this is all the tows are important. They all have a pretty significant importance to Anchorage.
And it's correct that this contract ends in May. Is that right?
That's where the 1-year renewal will take place. And then next year in May, it's one renewal. So there's 2 1-year renewals that are available on the current contract with the current vendor before we have to open it up to a new contract.
So if we look at 2024-77, we're just talking about possibly changing one portion of it, one type of tow that we would need to alter.
I
Correct?
mean, that's one solution. One solution is changing that portion of 2024-77. And there's other options that potentially we could come up with. That's probably more of a offline work session type of conversation.
And Ms. Praga, are you intending to work with the police department on bringing this forward? Is that your intention?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Well-
if anyone else would like to help, I would love that.
Great. Okay. We'll look forward to seeing that. That's great. All right. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
So when we're talking about specifically speaking to the tows that happen under, traffic offenses, I'm a DUIs, things of that nature, and then others. I know that from experience, sometimes those cars end up in pretty awkward places where if we were unable to tow them, they could present a public safety hazard, right? So I think it's not just a matter of convenience, but if we don't have the tow operators to go pick them up, then we're creating a new hazard. So I just think that's something I would keep in mind for a little extra context.
No other
Mr. Chair.
Nope.
Yes,
I'm-
Mr. Constant.
And I'm also,
You are in the queue as
Yep,
well. Okay.
thanks.
Let's go with Mr. Rivera first and then Mr. Constant.
great, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate you flagging this. I would say that the solution should not be to renege on a ordinance that we passed that I think is the right solution. I think the solution is to be a little bit more creative. So I would strongly oppose any effort to try to go back on the progress that we made in AO 2024-77 as amended. So a couple things. One, how many contractors typically bid when that RFP goes out for contracting with APD?
This particular one, one.
How many contractors exist in the municipality that could bid?
I don't have that number, but it's much more than one. We have another rotational that is open to a much wider, and there's several that are a part of that rotational program.
Sure. Do you ever get feedback from other contractors on why they bid or don't bid?
Yeah, I'm probably not the expert to answer that 'cause I don't run that contracting. So I can get you that answer probably with a little bit more specificity.
That'd be great. In addition, I would like data for the last 5 years. I assume that this contractor's been with us for a while now.
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like data for the last 5 years of cars that aren't claimed by the contractor. Unless that data shows that there's a large increase in the number of cars that aren't claimed in the last, when did we pass that ordinance, year, then I find that argument to be faulty. But definitely would like to look at that data. Thanks.
Yep, Mr. Constant.
Yeah, thank you. Along similar lines to Mr. Rivera, I just want to suggest that, and I don't know this contractor, but so this is not specific, it just feels like a money grab. And I would ask that the police department start working on a new solicitation so we aren't caught flat-footed, and that we're ready to pivot when the time comes and we don't find ourselves in an emergency procurement position and then spend just as much as we would spend if we gave into the extortionate practice that it feels like is coming. And so again, that's just a general sense. I don't know this contractor, so it's not anything I'm suggesting to them, but it does feel like a move that we should be very careful around to not concede the policy interest that we put forward.
Is that all, Mr. Constant?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Thank you for your comment. Okay. Doesn't look like I have any other questions for you. Thank you, sir. Ms. Braga, you had one other item you wanted to mention real quick, and then we
Yep.
want to make sure we have time for
I just want to
audience
quickly
participation.
mention, you may have noticed 10G5 AO 2025-25, amending municipal code 8-25-060 to expand principal liability to parents and guardians of minors possessing deadly weapons on school grounds or at school functions. And the public hearing is going to be pushed back to 4/8 on that. And Chair Constant says there will be capacity in our agenda to do a work session towards the end of March. There also is 10G10, which is AO 2025-28, which amends municipal code to require a report of lost or stolen firearms within 48 hours of discovery. So we'll have an opportunity, and Mr. Hurd has been working away at this, and we'll have slides and be able to give us more information at a later date.
Thanks for the update on that. Okay, thank you, sir. We're going to move to audience participation. I do have a quick announcement. I just wanted to update folks. It's been a couple of months, but there is still an effort underway to discuss bringing back the Public Safety Commission. And so me and a couple of other members are still working on that to look at engaging in a process to discuss what that commission should do, could do, the role that it would play. And so just want to make sure that folks know that that work is still underway, and there'll be updates on that soon. But just want to make sure that folks know that that's still going on. And with that, I think we're going to move to audience participation. Is there anyone physically here in the room who'd like to testify today? Okay, I don't see anybody in the room. Is there anybody on the phone who'd like to speak today? And is it star? What is it, star 6 to unmute? Is that right? No one seems to know. Yeah, I believe it's star 6 to mute. Unmute. Is there anyone on the phone?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead and state your name and where you live for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Emily Clock, and I live in District 3. I'm not speaking today on behalf of any organization. I'm just here today speaking as a member of this community. Yesterday was the third officer-involved shooting this year, and we're only 5 weeks into 2025. 6 people have now been killed by APD in less than 9 months. In yesterday's press conference with APD, a reporter mentioned that Anchorage residents might be fearful that this is the new normal. This is the new normal in Anchorage. That is tragic, heartbreaking, and frustrating, but true. Yesterday, when a reporter asked Chief Case what he would like to say to Anchorage residents, Chief Case said, quote, "It's going to be how we respond as a community collectively." I really appreciate this statement and I agree with it completely. However, APD and the mayor's office have not been making space to have community dialogue on this issue. The community here in Anchorage is trying to respond to this crisis, and we're told that APD has been doing work internally, but from the public perspective, all we know about these changes are the small amounts of information being shared in these committee meetings. I really appreciate Chief Case's commitment to rescheduling the APD operations work session so the public can hear about what APD has been doing. It's a very important first step, but work sessions generally don't allow public testimony. And overall, there has not been a willingness from APD and the mayor's office to engage publicly with the community on this issue. The same is true when it comes to the public report from the third-party investigation into Easter Leafa's death. This report came out almost a month ago, but APD and the mayor's office have not provided any opportunities to hear from the community. 8 of the 11 recommendations in the report say to enhance policies or procedures that already exist. What this says to me is that those policies and procedures are not the issue. The issue is whether officers are being trained to use them, and most importantly, whether officers are actually following those procedures when they're out in the community. Until APD and the mayor's office are willing to talk with community members, until they are willing to listen to people's pain, their frustration, their fears, as well as solutions from our community, there will not be meaningful progress. APD needs independent civilian oversight, and I encourage everyone to attend this Friday's work session from 1 to 2 to hear from Jacqueline Hendricks, who's the Inspector General of the Columbus Civilian Police Review Board. She'll be talking about how establishing the review board has had positive impacts for both the community and the police department in Columbus. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else on the phone who'd like to testify at this time? Just as a reminder, it's *6 to unmute. Okay, don't hear anyone. Anyone in the audience here? It doesn't look like it. All right, well, thank you everyone for being here today. This meeting is adjourned.